If I'm permitted to compare a great man with a small guy, Mark Twain was asked to speak at a public meeting once. He started by saying, Cicero was a great man, but he's no longer with us. Shakespeare is a greater man, he's gone. And Mark Twain not feeling very well either. Still, I will try my best. Since Dave Hutchinson has invited me, and Vishnuvai, Chandresh, and Kalpana have been looking after me so well, as if I'm a demigod, which I'm not. So I will first tell you, this is not going to be a scholarly lecture. I'm not going to quote chapter and verse from the Life Divine or Synthesis of Yoga or whatever. I will tell exactly where I am at this stage of my understanding of Sri Arabinda. It will be more a personal chat than a lecture. I hope that suits you. Anandamayi, Chaitanyamayi, Satyamayi, Parame. Offered to the Supreme Aditi, full of delight, full of consciousness, full of being. Children of the Mother. First thing I like to impress upon you is this. At the present state of my understanding, Sri Aurobindo's vision, message, and life is this. Everything has to be seen, judged, talked about from the point of view of the divine and not of man. If you read his writings carefully, you will find over and over again he says, the purpose of creation is a complete manifestation, self-unfolding, self-expression of the divine in the world. All this talk about supramental evolution, transformation of nature, and so on and so forth, are really means, instruments. They are not the aims of the yoga. This might come as a surprise to many people. The whole talk about supramental evolution has been so much blown up that people don't realize it is only the first step towards fulfilling the purpose of God in the world. So forget about yourself. Instant the divine in your heart. That is the yoga. In the second canto of the book 1 of Savitri, entitled The Issue, Sri Aurobindo says about Savitri, the fixity of cosmic events, fastened by indivisible links, she must disrupt. Dislodged by a soul's force, her own past, a block on the Immortal's road. So take heed, Immortals is coming and may knock at your door anytime, depending on your preparation and your receptivity. You will remember that the golden but small book, the Mother, Sri Aurobindo says there are two powers or forces that can bring about the goal of the yoga. One is human aspiration or earth's aspiration, and another is a coming down of grace. I've just quoted from the Savitri about the Immortal's road. Apparently the suggestion is that he is coming. Who he is, we'll say in a few minutes. On the other hand, the other side of the yogic encounter, the human aspiration, he speaks of that in the other canto, the vision and the moon. He speaks of man by saying, a borrower of supernatural gold, he paves the way to immortality. So we have to go up to the divine only because the divine could come down to us. It is a very paradoxical situation. The divine has manifested the world, but is not manifest in the world. Is screened, veiled, hidden. waiting to be discovered by us. But who are us? Who are we? We're all limited God. There is in the vision of the moon another tremendous line full of significance, and I don't think people have understood the meaning of it entirely even now. A God come down and greater by the fall. How can you be greater by a fall? This is because, and this is by the theme of my lecture, the divine is waiting to self-discover him. Another aspect of his own being, consciousness, delight, joy, power, whatever, which he does not know about it yet. Can it be the divine does not know something? Not the divine as such, not God per se, but the divine limited in the world. There's a letter of Arabinda in which it says there are different levels of being and consciousness hierarchically arranged one on top of the other. All of them have an impact on events in the world and on human life. There are things there which are trying to manifest themselves in the world, in the physical being of man and the earth consciousness, but all of them don't get realized. And yet, there is an attempt going on the part of the divine himself for a new self-discovery. This self-discovery by divine himself as what? The material divine. He still has to know that he has assumed materiality to make it divinized. This is the purpose of the yoga. Why then the supermind? You must know, as Arindam said over and over again, that there are certain levels of consciousness above the human mind and below the supermind. Incidentally, to give a brief description of the supermind, we would say, supermind is the divine's knowledge of himself and his own native power of acting. You will see that he is describing supermind as knowledge-hyphenated will, comprehensive integral knowledge, and infallible all-effective will, combined together. Where does it come from? From the consciousness force, the Chit Shakti. Consciousness becomes knowledge, force becomes will. This supermind has been described by Sri Aurobindo as the initial coming out of the divine. First movement, first dynamis, looking towards the world that is to be, that he himself is going to be. So if this is the supermind, all knowledge and self-knowledge and world knowledge, to know the divine integrally, and that's a very favorite word with Sri Aurobindo, one has to attain to the supramental consciousness. Starting from the higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, overmind, linking and joining the human mind and the supermind. On any of these levels of the consciousness, the self can be known. It is not true that the mind cannot know God. It can, only partially, incompletely. Therefore, with a certain amount of error attached to that knowledge. There is the Kena Upanishad, a saying that mind cannot attain to God. On the other hand, it says, Manasayeva praptavyam. By mind itself it has to be attained. Now, is there a contradiction? No. I think there's a hint here of Sri Aurobindo's metaphysical psychology. Namely, mind itself has several levels. On the lowest level, you can't know God. On the higher levels, linking it with the supermind, the knowledge of self can be had, obtained, achieved, accomplished. This brings me to the point that it is absolutely impossible to attain the supramental consciousness without knowing this self. Which self? What is called in Sanskrit the Atman, the one reality in all. This is not the psychic being. The self which is one in all. If you do not know this, you really have not attained any knowledge of God. And this can be known on levels of consciousness below the supermind. So by the higher mind or illumined mind or intuitive mind, and much better by the overmind, you know the self as the one in all. But this will not give you the complete knowledge or integral knowledge, because those of you who have studied Schoen's psychology will know that overmind has the inherent knowledge of one on the topmost level, and yet it prefers one aspect of the divine to another. That means the knowledge is not integral. Either it prefers the impersonal to the personal, the static to the dynamic, the silent to the word. So it is somewhat separated. And ignorance starts from the separation. We want complete, comprehensive, integral knowledge of the divine. It is for that the supermind is necessary. But it so happens that under the supramental knowledge of the divine, you also have the knowledge. The divine wants self-expression in the world. So you now start applying the supramental knowledge through its infallible will to the lower nature. Why? To transform it. Why transform it? And I'm quoting Schoen verbatim. The transformation of nature is necessary for the complete self-manifestation of the divine in the world. So if you are doing integral yoga, don't do it for yourself. Do it for the divine. Some of you may know that after Shivendu retired to Pondicherry, there's a lot of misunderstanding what he was doing there and why. And he said, my yoga is not for myself, but for humanity. By which he meant that he was not seeking his own liberation, which is for him the sublime step of the ego. I seek my own liberation, not caring for you at all. But you are me with another face. So one's liberation is only a stepping stone towards the liberation of all. And if I forget that, I'm still being egoistic. So people started to misunderstand him. It was not seeking his own liberation, he was seeking the good of all humanity. So they immediately corrected his own statement. My yoga is not for humanity, but for the divine. Even then there was a misunderstanding, as if he was wanting to seek the realization of the divine. No, the realization of the divine is only the first step towards the complete self-unfoldment, self-expression, self-manifestation of the divine in the world. This is why matter has to be transformed. Please remember that everything is a formation of the conscious force. There's nothing which is not consciousness. Not that they're all conscious, but the stuff, that material, is conscious force. Each cell of the body is a formation of the conscious force, hiding consciousness in it. Shenda's yoga is the most effective means of arousing, awaking, making active the consciousness which is in the cell, which might be called unconscious consciousness. It is in itself, in essence, consciousness. In its outward manifestation, unconscious, semi-conscious, subconscious. To make this unconscious consciousness completely conscious, by which one could say, as Savitri says, even matter will remember God. In another statement, Shinda says, our purpose is to make matter aware of God. How can matter be aware of God? Only if the divine manifests himself as the material divine, only then matter can know, I am God. So liberation is not of the soul, liberation not only of the mind and life, but liberation is of the body also, which ultimately means the cells, because they constitute the body. So Shenda's liberation's concept of liberation is total, integral. Every part of the being has to be liberated, including the physical. Why? Because without liberation, divine cannot self-manifold himself. This self-unfoldment of the divine in the creation is the meaning, the significance, the value. This was the creation was made. So if we are coming to integral yoga, all of who actually have done, start from now to think in terms of the divine and not yourself. Blot yourself out completely. Do I become non-existent? No. This so happens again in the paradoxical way of the yoga. The more you forget yourself, more you discover yourself. The self that we talk about now is not the self, the separative ego. The true self that you are is one with all. The true Atman is a bridge to everybody, which is another being in another form, which is myself. So this universality of consciousness, this totality of apprehension, this completeness of the application of the will of this knowledge to the whole field of nature. Why, again I repeat, for the self-expression of God in matter. This new self-discovery of the divine is what Shiva is working for. Incidentally, I may mention that this question is uppermost in many people's minds, even though who are devotees of Sri Arabinda. What happened to him? He didn't transform his body. He passed away. Why? I do not know if you know of the journal Sri Arabinda Archives and Research. Some of you may. In one of the issues of the particular journal, Sri Arabinda Archives and Research, Sri Aurobindo published, or rather they published, the editors published a diary of yoga. Sri Aurobindo is keeping a journal of his own yogic sadhana day by day. And one entry is, in this time, the Vidya Avidya realization will be complete. That by which Amritam will be accomplished will not be done. He is talking of himself. Now, Vidya Avidya is a Sanskritic phrase for what Sri Aurobindo calls the overmind. It is the knowledge of the one, and yet it has knowledge of the separation or preferences of the different aspects of the divine. So it is avidya from that point of view, not complete knowledge, but vidya because it has got the knowledge of the one. That realization, he says, will be complete this life. Now we go back to another letter of Sri Arabinda about Krishna. Here again, Krishna is an avatar. In the Bhagavad Gita is Purushottama, the divine himself. And yet Krishna is a historical person. In that aspect, he is actually an avatar. In the Bhagavad Gita, is the classification of cancer. Some beings called Vibhuti, extraordinary beings. In some way or other, they have exceeded humanity in power, in some kind of talent, in knowledge, in love, in spirituality. They are called Vibhutis. Krishna counts himself as a Vibhuti. Vrishninang Vasudevoham, Pandavanang Dhananjaya. I am Vasudeva, I am the clan of Vrishni. That was the family that he belonged to. And Dhananjaya, that is Arjuna among Pandavas. He was a Vibhuti too, an extraordinary man. The avatar is also Vibhuti and is also supreme reality. But each avatar has a particular contribution to make to evolution of consciousness. Then about Krishna he said, on the 24th November 1926, Krishna descended into the physical. Whose? Sri Aurobindo's. Before that he said, Krishna did not set out for physical transformation. He over-mentalized his mind, and that's about all. In Krishna's own case, it didn't come down even to vital, fall as a physical. How did Sri Aurobindo take evolution 2 steps forward? Overmind came down into his physical. What does it actually mean in concrete terms? Every physical action was being conducted by the overmind consciousness and will. And immediately adds, being a truth seeker and a lover of truth, that in this life, that is his own physical existence, which came manifested in 1872, 15th August, Amritam, the supramental immortality will not be achieved. So he did not fail his mission at all. Over and over again he says, the transformation is not our work. Our mission is to bring down the supermind and join it to matter. That is his personal mission. And he succeeded enormously, more than 100% in that. I happened to be at the ashram when he passed away. I saw the golden light myself. And I'm a bit skeptical about these things, though I believe in miracles, because there is no such thing as miracle. We call miracles something that happens of which we do not know the laws. That's about all. If you had expanded your consciousness, you would know why the miracle has happened. It's not a miracle. It's perfectly natural, or supernatural, if you like, from our point of view. But I saw this light, golden light, in early morning, in midday, in evening, filling the whole atmosphere. That's the surcharge of the supermind in his material body. Then it started to withdraw on the 9th of December, when Mother said, now the body has to be buried. You may know that the French doctors came, according to law, they allowed the dead body to be kept for 48 hours for relatives to come or to make funeral arrangements, etc. They said, we don't see any sign of death in it. You just do whatever you like. And it stayed like that for 111 hours almost. This is because the supermind had been brought down to the physical frame of Sri Arabinda. And that was his mission, personally completely successful. Those who have been to Samadhi will see that Mother has got a message. The material envelope of Sri Arabinda, not to Sri Arabinda, the body of Sri Arabinda, who have achieved all, who have attempted all, who have achieved all. How could he say this? Because what the body's mission was to force down the supermind, evolutionary or revolutionary, into itself. Fill the cells for certain hours so that it is established. Then it withdrew. You'll also see in Sri Aurobindo's letters, he says, there will be further evolution after the supramental, which is the evolution of knowledge. Function is the leader of evolution in the world. Knowledge, complete integral knowledge of the divine. But the further evolution of the anandam, the delight of being, the bliss of existence, that is not my work. So please try and understand very clearly, objectively, dispassionately, even though he is Guru, what exactly he was trying to do and how much did he actually achieve. He achieved much more than it was promised. This is a message that I brought to you from the ashram. Clarify misunderstandings. Don't expect too much. Don't build your high hopes without the sure foundation. As long as the supermind was not ready to come into his body, he went on to the last moment, last breath of his yoga. He never ceased to practice yoga. The theme of this conference, evolution, evolution, transformation, new creation, they are all in one word summarized. The self-expression of the divine. It can be done by revolutionary means individually. It can be done evolutionary way cosmically. If the transformation comes about, there will be a new creation. The new creation will be a world of knowledge. At the moment, it's a knowledge of ignorance. This world is a world of ignorance. That is to say, there is no knowledge of the self functioning here actively. We individually may go to the divine. The world doesn't. The world has to be made capable of receiving the divine in itself. And that was the self-discovery of the divine in matter. A new self-discovery, he says. So therefore, if yoga is union with God, how far can the union go? By the psychic being, the spiritual self in us, by the mind, life and body, all of this together, simultaneously, integrally. This is the mantra of the yoga, integralism. Nothing left out. Nothing accepted on its face value. Everything has to be seen in the light of the divine. Everything has to be seen. The divine wants it to be done. Everything has to be done the way the divine has actually dispensed already. Is this complete determinism? As I said, dispensed already. No. It's not complete determinism. You have got freedom of will. However small it may be, however little it may be, however slight it may be, you are free. And if you are not free, you will never be able to seek the divine even. Who seeks the divine in you? The divine seeks the divine in you. That's why Sriyendra says, it's a play of hide and seek. He has hidden himself and is seeking himself in the world. You talk of the fulfillment of God's purpose in the world. Is not God fulfilled? Is he not complete? Is he not integral? No, it is a God that is limited the world that has got to fulfill itself. Shanda has got a very beautiful sentence. The self that we have to perfect is not the original spiritual self, that is perfect always, essentially. The self in nature that we have to perfect. The self in nature is not perfect. It is very much under the thumb of the ignorant nature. To lift that veil, that burden of the thumb of nature in us, and invite, invoke, receive the supernature, which is the supramental nature, in the totality of our being and personality. This is your task as an integral yogin. Who is your master? The divine. One of the mantras of the integral yoga is the secret of sadhana is to have the divine make your sadhana for you. Because he is the yogin. He is the seeker, he is the aspirant. He is one who is seeking the divine, in himself is limited as yourself and myself. This is the game he is playing. It's a leela, it's a free act, but an act which has a purpose. We have the concept of leela in Indian philosophy, in yoga, for a long time, thousands of years, particularly during the last 600 years in Bengal, the school of Chaitanya, whose name some of you may know. Incidentally, Shinda speaks also of another great tradition of India, a hoary, timeless, nobody knows his history, Tantra. And I've done some work in Tantra as it developed in Kashmir, which is a great venue of Tantric philosophy and yoga. There is one particular school which is Shaiva. This Shiva is not one of the Vishnu, Shiva, and Mahadeva are not the Trinity. The Shiva is here the name of the ultimate reality itself. It calls it Pratyavigya school, self-recognition. It says we know who you are, but we don't recognize who we are. So to recognize ourselves as Shiva, the complete integral divine. They also believe in conscious force. They believe in ascent of consciousness and descent of consciousness. Great deal of similarity is shown in this yoga, even though he didn't know about this philosophy and yoga till about the middle of 1930s. He didn't know of its existence at all. However, this philosophy talks about the descent of consciousness, which is the Shiva, the divine, coming to material level and hiding himself there. Evolution, the ascent of consciousness, is the discovery of Shiva in all levels of being. You see how similar it is to Sri Arabinda. It's wonderful that these people, the philosophers in Kashmir, were also very poetic. In one particular commentary on a basic text, the commentator says, Aroha abaroha dola kalim kurvan, anavarata ishvara avastitaha. It likens, compares the ascent and descent of consciousness with a swing. Playing on the swing of descent and ascent of consciousness, Ishvara always remains what he is. The stability and flux, the complete peace and the movement, the transcendent and the universal. This is integrality, which you find completely worked out in this philosophy in Kashmir of Shaiva. But in his articles on rebirth and justice and karma, Chandra says that the transformation of nature has been attempted by Tantra and Vaishnavism. They came with an S of success, but didn't quite achieve it. Why not? I've got some explanation why, but that may be taking us to too deep philosophical waters. Maybe it can come in the questions. But these particular philosophers, even though they say that you were limited Shiva, even then as in this philosophy I'm limited God or the divine, it breaks all its fetters. Space, time, causality, etc. These are the fetters that bind us. Pasha, they call them. You break them one by their yoga. It's a very effective yoga. And you realize yourself again, Pratyavigya, know yourself again, recognize yourself as Shiva, which is everything. I am everything, that is the realization you have, including matter. You are the physical body. Shiva become physical body. Now how near it comes to Sri Arabinda. And yet, the greatest philosopher of that school says, Deho pataiva purna mokshaha. Only in the fall of the body you can have complete liberation. So the body still has to be abandoned. Another disciple of Abhirabhav Gupta, this great philosopher I've just referred to, Kshemaraja, he says in one little monograph, Deho patayeva paramashiva bhattaraka bhavati. You get complete liberation while alive. You move like Shiva. All your movements and your actions are like Shiva. But only on the fall of the body one can become complete integral Shiva. So you ask the question, why? If Shiva has become the body, why can the body know itself as Shiva also? It's a very subtle difference. You know everything as yourself as Shiva, but those things that you are, they don't know that they're Shiva. So this task is that all that divine has become, for them to be able to know that they're divine, including the body. This takes one step forward the whole tantric tradition. And yet, Chandra left his body. Because he knew his body is not really capable of transformation. He had told the mother also, very easily. So his mission was personally to bring the supermind down and make it connected with matter. I've seen one message of the mother that the supermind has been active since 1950 individually. But on 20th February, it became manifest. 29th February, was it? It became manifest and working universally. So this is a progressive activity of the supermind, going into different fields of the world existence and bringing out changes. Today there is a crisis in the world of all kinds. Conventions, values, ideas, everything is breaking down. Why? We suffer meanwhile, great deal. It is part of the divine scheme of things. Why? So there's got a sentence, one of the tasks of the supermind is to break the mental mold. We're all mental beings. Unless you break the mental mold, you can't reach the supermind. So this is in the occult tradition, something that had to come. You go down to the Nadir point, then you get to the highest. The supermind is the link between the complete below and the complete high. In between, Sri Aurobindo the yogi is linking them together. This is how to see and look upon Sri Aurobindo. Personally, they are not in the least anxious that they should be accepted, either as yogis or as masters, as gurus or anything. If I may touch on a personal note, I used to teach in England for a long time. I used to come back to the ashram every 2 years on visits. And I used to see the mother. She was extremely compassionate, kind, and gave me interviews. Once I had come back and she asked me, how are you working abroad? I said, I never speak of Sri Aurobindo to anybody unless I'm asked. If you ask, then you will get. If you're giving a lecture in Indian philosophy, Indian yoga of current times, you have to bring Sri Aurobindo, but not Sri Aurobindo otherwise, separately. You know what mother told me? I'm quoting a verbatim. This is mother's own notes, I'm quoting her verbatim. This is exactly right. Do not bring my or Sri Aurobindo name into anything. Let the truth shine in its own light. Truth is our guide, not Sri Aurobindo the mother. I'm being unfaithful? No. They are our masters because they represent the divine. In the synthesis of yoga, Sri Aurobindo says, I don't like this very idea of guru. The divine is the guru. That is the Indian tradition also. There is one only guru, one spiritual master, the divine. What about Ramakrishna and Arabinda and Ramana Maharshi and all their others? They're Guru Devas. There are many great yogis in whom the master aspect of the divine does not manifest. And there are many great masters who are not great yogis. This is again a paradox of the divine. Here's a paradox. is a paradox because he wants to make a complete harmony of it. That reminds me of the wit and humor of Sri Arabinda. In one letter he says, he goes on explaining things, psychology and metaphysics and all the rest of it, and then he says, I'm very sorry it is so complex. The divine is complex. What can I do? So he really is very paradoxical because he wants to bring about a complete harmony of things. So this business of linking together heaven and earth, God and man, this is the message of the integral yoga because, again I repeat, what does the divine want? Not your liberation, not your transformation, but his own self-expression completely, comprehensively, integrally in matter. So matter, really speaking, is the one concern of the divine. In his own plane, he is what he is. Nobody really can touch him. You can't even approach him in one aspect. Completely silent, nobody knows where he is. But it so happens another paradoxically and harmoniously has come forward, has manifested himself. And in the manifestation, paradoxically again, he has hidden himself. The pearl in shell. Break the bonds of the shell, bring out the pearl. You are all in prison. You are meant to make the prison a palace. About the supramental being, which is a supramentalized transformed body, and this says, equipped to wear the earthly body of God. What is the earthly body? The material body. But how can it be the earthly body of God unless it is transformed? It is divinized. The means of doing that is the supramental evolution. What is evolution? We are using the word and banding it about. Cyril is not a biologist. He didn't take his cue from Darwin. His precise definition of evolution is this. I'm quoting him. Evolution is the emergence of the many from the one. The whole world is emerged, the world of multiplicity from the divine. This is evolution. On the other hand, it is also the evolution of the one from the many. And that is what is happening now in evolution. So all the four words have got theme are connected. One cannot be achieved without the other. The new creation is a new matter, a new life, a new mind, and self-expressing a new divine. This will be the self-discovery of the divine. Thank you.